So there is a topic that I wanted to discuss, something that seems to have really kind of gone viral. And I wanted to bring a different perspective in regards to it because I think that it's very important for us to see the other side of this. It was a young lady who, after finding someone that she thought was like the staple husband, she was a single mother before meeting him. She went through something that was so hard to imagine for any single mother. Because when you find someone that you think is going to love your children, respect your children, and treat them as your own, as their own, as you do, then it is extremely, extremely disappointing and very, very hurtful when you find out that what you thought was something that was there to be an extension of you, to love your children and to protect your children, that it ends up being something completely opposite. I want you guys to take a quick listen to this young woman's perspective in regards to her testimony. Just to give you a little bit of context, her YouTube channel was geared towards teaching women how to be a trophy wife, how to get a husband or get someone to marry you in less than a year. This is what she promoted, what she practiced, and I think the reason that I'm wanting to share this is because I think so many people, we focus so much on it being a hierarchy or a certain thing that we should strive for when it comes to finding a husband. And as long as we get the ring, regardless of what comes with it, regardless of the dangers behind it when it's absent of the approval of God, we look for just that validation of being chosen, right? And so regardless of who it is, the desire to be chosen, to that extent, reveals so much more about an individual. It reveals that that person may have a history of rejection and a need and a desire to feel validated, which means there is something so much deeper behind all of this, and why it's super important, why we need to make sure that we are healed, restored, and delivered before we begin to present ourselves to be available as a wife or even a husband, because men can go through this as well. Because in the end, we end up not only hurting ourselves when things don't work out the way we expect them to, but our children who are now a part of the package end up getting hurt as well. And listen, this is not to in any way blame this young woman, because she was in a very vulnerable position because she needed healing. But I commend her for, after what happened, her protecting her children rather than desiring to keep that validation or to keep the title of being married to someone with money and status. She vowed to protect her children over that, which I am super grateful that she did that. So let me let you listen to her testimony of what happened over this time period, and then I'll come back and give more content.
6 weeks ago, I was changing my daughter, my 4-year-old daughter, and I noticed that when I changed her, she was red and very sensitive. And immediately, my first thought was, did someone touch her? Oh, God. Gosh. So I asked her, I said, baby, did somebody touch you? And she ended up saying it was daddy. I felt like my world ended on that day. My husband wasn't home at the time when she told me, but I knew he would be coming home soon, so all I could do was just say, don't tell him that you told me. And I just instantly started trying to think of how I could get my kids out of the house. Because I knew if I confronted him or asked him about it, that he would just lie. And that he would probably just continue to keep doing stuff to her, but just become more covert or more sneaky or whatever. As soon as my husband got home, he was actually picking up the boys from school, my 2 older boys from school. As soon as he got home, I told him that I was gonna go Halloween shopping with my sister because I just needed an excuse to get out of the house with all the kids. And I knew if I said something like, oh, I'm going to the grocery store, that it would be suspicious. Like, why am I bringing all the kids and like packing things, like things that we would need and things like that. So going Halloween shopping was the best thing I could think of to just hurry up and get the kids out of the house. I'm sorry, I had to get myself together. So when I got to the hospital, they basically told me that we had to go to another hospital because they didn't do physical exams, like that kind of physical exam there. So a police officer escorted the kids and I to another hospital where they were able to evaluate my daughters. It ended up coming out that he had actually been touching both of my daughters, who are only 2 and 4 years old. It still feels like a dream. Like, when this first happened, I just kept waking up every day and just hoping that this was a dream. Because it's literally my worst nightmare. It's my worst nightmare. I myself am a product of RAPE. That's how I came to be. And was also, abused as a child by a neighbor's husband. And I specifically prayed to God that my children would never, ever, ever have to go through this. And I'm just not quite sure how this happened, why this happened.
Okay, so now that you've heard her testimony, it was something very moving for me to see her in that vulnerable place. Now, I must say this, when I saw it, I actually thought that maybe she was going to say something in reference to he was abusive to her, maybe that he had cheated and, there was infidelity. Never did I imagine or expect for her to mention that her daughter would tell her that she had been violated by her own father. And to then later hear that it was not just the 4-year-old, but the 2-year-old, okay? Now that's a whole nother discussion in regards to the demons that are operating through the people that desire to hurt children on this level. That's a whole nother discussion, which I won't even touch on. The purpose of this video is for me to bring to your attention, because I know there are so many more women out there that are just like this young lady, all right, who have a history of trauma, and they are looking for validation in so many other places other than Jesus Christ, having a relationship with him, right? So you heard her speak and expressing that she was a product of RAPE. Her being a product of that, number one, already is a huge open door spiritually. The level of trauma in the bloodline related to that, number one. Number two, she was also assaulted as a child by her neighbor. So to be a product of something that was perverse, right? And then as a child to be violated, that internally does so much to a person to where you feel almost as if you don't know where you belong in society because you weren't thought about and created out of love like God expected it to be done through marriage and through covenant. And so because that did not happen, the way that she came to be, and then to also be a product of sexual assault, or not a product, but to have experienced that, the trauma, the lack of trust, the rejection, the confusion, the spiritual aspect of that now has opened a spiritual door to perversion as well. And there's so many different things that can take place. And the reason that it is so important that as women, that we get healing, we get deliverance, that we find a community of people and believers who can pour into us who we are as daughters of the King. The reason that is so important is because without knowing these things, it can affect every decision that you make as a young adult and as an adult, as a mother. So she became a mother at a very young age. She became a mother at, I think she said 17 years old. And then maybe a year or so after that, she had another child. Okay, so she already had 2 children at a very young age. And so when she met this person, she was in the headspace of needing or feeling that she needed to find someone that had money, and who was going to take care of her and her 2 children. So already the desire to do those things is separate from what God would choose for you, right? So when we make choices in order to make a covenant and to join with people for the wrong reasons, and that is absent of the following of Jesus Christ, the enemy is always there lurking, looking for an opportunity to be able to present to you exactly what you want, which seems like so much, the financial aspect, like, oh, wow, I've really hit the jackpot with this one. But then when you fall into it and you follow through with it, then you see the enemy was involved the entire time. The enemy will offer you financial gain in order to bring more trauma to your bloodline. The enemy will offer you the world as long as he can break you through the process of what you've chosen. It is never going to make you better. His desire is to consistently open traumatic doors to you and your bloodline so that it will continue through your children. Until we, as believers in Jesus Christ, wake up to recognize the healing that we need. If you have been someone who's gone through anything like this, the last thing on your mind should be to find a husband. The first thing is for you to make Jesus Christ your husband. And as Jesus becomes your husband and he begins to prune you, heal you, and restore you, the rejection will leave, your identity will be in Christ, and you will immediately recognize the characteristics of a person that does not represent Jesus Christ, that does not have the fruits to be ahead of your family. If he's not putting Jesus Christ first, he should never be chosen to be head over your children. So I am giving this message because I think it is imperative that we stop now looking for a husband if we have yet to allow God to heal and to prune us. If you do not do that, unfortunately, these types of things happen. It may not be that, but it could be, you find out later on down the line the person is abusive. Or later down the line, this person completely flips the script, does not follow Jesus, and you're in a covenant with someone lacking purpose, which is the whole point of the covenant, especially right now. Anyone that God puts you with, it is for purpose, for the kingdom, not because you desire to be a wife, to wear a ring, to have a title, or to come together with someone who has money. And when we get our mind outside of that it's not about sex, it's not about title, it's not about love, but it's about purpose. And the only way that the purpose is going to see and come together the way God has chosen for it to is when we do it God's way. When we make it about his purpose and not about our own desires, our fleshly, carnal desires. Yes, does God want us to feel loved and supported and all of those things? Absolutely. That is what comes with it. But the first thing that should be sought is, God, what is it within me that needs to be changed, that needs to be healed, that needs to be restored before I think twice about joining into a covenant with someone else? I need to restore my covenant with you. Okay? I pray that this young lady finds Christ the way that she needs to now that this has taken place, so that she can allow her daughters to be loved on, and that she can pour the love of Jesus and his word into her daughters so that they do not grow up looking for validation because they feel rejected by their own father. I pray because I know that she made a comment by stating that, she prayed that God would never allow her children to experience that. And see, this is an open door for people to say, well, she prayed to God and asked for God not to allow her children to experience this, but it happened anyway. Why didn't God protect them? That's a dangerous place, because we have to look at, did we consult God before we made these decisions? If we make choices outside of God's leading, then we invite the enemy in to do those things that we ask God not to allow to happen. When we give the legal right to the enemy, God is not going to step in and force you to do anything because you have free will, which is why we must consult God in everything, which is why we must not create covenants with people absent of the approval of God. God's desire is to protect. Now, I can guarantee you, more than likely, God may have given her a sign or two before making the choice to marry this person. But when you have spiritual doors that may be open to sin in any fashion, whether it's unforgiveness, right? Fornication, whatever that looks like, then you are blinded to even hear and understand the things that God may be trying to show you. And you move forward with your own desires because you feel that that is what's right for you. Now, this is not to condemn because I was that person. The choices that I made to go into New Age, God gave me many signs, but I chose to go in that direction anyway. Because of my sinful behaviors, I was blinded from recognizing what was God and what wasn't. So in order for us to build exactly the way God has called us to build in this season, it is important that we focus and pay attention. What is God telling me to work on? What is he telling me to build? And he's starting with you. He's starting internally. Okay? Yes, there are going to be relationships and marriages that God is going to put together to rebuild what the biblical family is supposed to look like. But in the midst of that, it's going to require you to look at you. And you can't blame God. Okay? We can't blame God. So let us pray for this young lady that through this hurt and through this testimony, that she will pour herself into the word, or pour the word into her and her children so that they can begin to heal from this. And I pray that this not only heals her, but her story will also heal others who need to recognize this before they make the same bad choices. All right, guys, I love you. God bless.